Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Stephanie Chang, The Wall Street Journal, and Jacek Olczak of Philip Morris International.
Jacek, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining me for this conversation that we're going to have about driving change amid disruption, something you're very familiar with, and I'm sure others in the audience are as well. So I wanted to start off by just talking about, we are in a time of big global change and shifts that are impacting society and our personal and professional lives. What advice would you give to organizations that are really trying to have an impact on positive social change during this time?
Well, that's the good one. We are living in the very complicated, challenging, whatever are the better words, times. And I think it's perfectly okay still to have dreams. And if you see that there is an issue, that there is a problem, just spell it out and go after it. Because there are so many unresolved issues still today. And we cannot just keep on sweeping the things under the carpet because we essentially run out of carpet. So either we have a dream of, which will be extremely stupid, let's buy another carpet, or we start solving what we have swept under the carpet. Mm-hmm. We came across this in Philip Morris many years ago. And as you know, it's a company which is one of the major international companies selling cigarettes. We know that cigarettes is a very bad idea to smoke. And we come up with the dream more than a decade ago that can we do something about it? Can we understand why smoking is so bad? Can we significantly, drastically reduce the harm created by smoking? And as you know, or some of you may know, tobacco is or cigarettes is a very attractive financial business. And it's very difficult if you're on the top of this, the major in the league, to disrupt yourself. But we have promised ourselves that if we don't solve this whole thing, it's going to be actually very bad for all the stakeholders. They are consumers, they are smokers, but they are obviously shareholders and many other people who have interest in the tobacco industry. So it's much easier for me to say from today's perspective that it's perfectly okay to spell out the dream, but when I'm living at the time in a company, I have a pleasure and honor to lead the company, which is going through this fundamental change. And my dream is that, before my retirement, I will have to remind people how a cigarette look like, almost like we have to go to our kids and remind them how the landline phones were looking like.
Mm-hmm. So, and you've called this unsmoking the world, I think, is the phrase that you've used.
Yes.
So we're talking about a full-on no smoking period for the globe is the goal.
Yes, just to explain that the issue is not really about the tobacco, the nicotine, and and everyone can go and check, and there's enough of the scientific evidence that it's not the nicotine which causes the harm caused by smoking, it's the smoking itself. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you combust, that you burn, you produce the thousands of chemicals, many of them are very bad, carcinogens, etc. So the whole thing is how can you, create, develop, design the product when you significantly reduce the exposure to all of the substances. This technology for the last 7-8 years do exist. This technology is verifiable. There is a science around this technology, and there is a growing interest among other industry members to go and to solve the problem of smoking once and forever. We're alone, I have to admit, companies like Philip Morris of the industry, because everyone believes it is much easier. You obviously can think that you can go to the smokers and tell them to quit smoking. And the reality is there are more than 1 billion people in the planet who smoke, and for whatever reasons, they won't quit. And this is not that companies like Philip Morris has a magic wand which will not help them to quit. But despite all the efforts in the smoking tobacco regulations. And you're talking more than 2 decades of these regulations. The smoking rates are high, and they continue to be high. And this is despite the very heavy taxation, price, the restrictions on the marketing, you name it. So I think that time is coming, and maybe we're living in these fortunate times when the technology and the science can accelerate solution of the problem by giving those smokers who otherwise would continue smoking a vastly better alternatives. So that's the essence of what we're doing. Then we coined the term, let's unsmoke the world. And our ambition is that in just 2 years from now, 2.5 years from now, by 2025, more than half of our revenues should be generated for smoke-free products. And we have set the target. Remember what I said at the beginning about it's perfectly okay to have a dream. When we set the target, to be very frank, this was a shot in the dark. This was a few years ago when we said by 2025 we need to get to the 50%. We today already have 30%. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are on the perfect trajectory to go there. We have a number of the markets where 70% of our revenues are already generated by smoke-free products. I have a markets today. As you know, Philip Morris is famous for a Marlboro brand. Then the new products are overselling, are selling more than Marlboro. And we are perfectly okay with this, that the Marlboro is declining.
Well, and as you said that you had set the goal a few years ago, and now today we have a lot of things that we're dealing with in the world, COVID and the war in Ukraine and rising inflation, political divisiveness. How have these things impacted PMI in your goals?
We are truly global international company with about 80,000 employees essentially operating in every country in the world. So every day, every week, every month, we are confronted with some sort of a crisis. Mm-hmm. You have a climate crisis, the impact of a climate change. You have such a geopolitical tragedy like the war in Ukraine. You have hunger. You have a number of issues, right? And I don't recall a single day or a week when I am not informed that something has happened in one of our geographies. There are things which we have an impact on, and I'm trying to keep the organization focused on the things when we have an impact on. And we cannot fix all the problems. There are a few things which we can fix. Product is the one. Yes, we can fix our impact on the environment. We can fix or help fixing the problem with, for example, living wage in the agronomy, in agriculture. We can have a significant contribution in elimination of child labor in agriculture. But these are the things which we know very well when we have an impact. We have a very rigid assessment methodology, if you like, based on the materiality of our impact. And I'm trying just to focus the company on these are the things we can change. Unfortunately, we are unhappy about many other things, but we have no impact on this one. But at least if we can achieve the change in these domains, when we can change, I think it already makes you, happy when you come back late night home and you know that you achieved something.
We know that innovation can't happen in a vacuum, right? That there is the need for collaboration and partnerships. Can you talk about how that comes into play and what your goals are at PMI? How much you're relying on collaboration and partnerships?
Well, there is a lot of collaborations, obviously, in a company. I mean, the products which we're talking about and the science and assessments is a very complex territory, and you have to hold it together internally. It's already a challenge that the company is really putting all the efforts behind this one single big goal, unsmoke the world. Now, you also realize that we're not working in a vacuum. Okay, it's a very broad ecosystem of stakeholders which have a say and should have a say on the tobacco, on the smoking-related matters. There is a health community, there is a trade, there are the people who are working very hard in agriculture. You're talking millions and millions of people, stakeholders, if you like, who are there. I mean, I have to admit that, at the beginning of our journey, when we thought we're gonna, significantly reduce the harm caused by smoking, etc., we will almost be welcomed with, the petals thrown in front of you, etc., flower petals thrown in you, and that didn't came. There are still people outside, very much on the regulators, I have to admit, and they always don't like complaining about the regulators, but there is something which is becoming more and more irritating, I have to admit, is that everyone is preoccupied with the tobacco industry, and presumably because there was a past, etc. It's perfectly okay, right? And everyone should spend some time digging into the history and so on. But if you just focus on the history, there is a future, right? And you need to work on the future. Whatever we decide, whatever our assessment will be, we can't change the past, but it can change today, it can change tomorrow. And there is such a preoccupation among many regulators, ministries of health and the likes, about the tobacco industry, and Philip Morris actually in particular, that we very conveniently forgot that there is 1 billion people in the world who every day buy and smoke a cigarette. And I'm trying to bring this whole thing that I'm perfectly okay having even very critical conversations about my company, but at the same time don't lose the focus about this 1 billion people, because we have to do something. And every time when we slow the access to the better products, awareness of these products, address the affordability of these products for them, they will smoke. They will continue smoking. So it's not that we're acting in a vacuum and we have a time to react, because every day they will be making a wrong decision. So this is where we are. I'm not complaining. I'm a very positive person. I always was saying that in a hospital when I was born, I was the only kid who welcomed the world laughing, not crying. Mm-hmm. And I will remain like this despite all the challenges which we are confronted with these days.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jacek. I had about 4 more questions, but I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.